I heard somebody saying, let's start the year in February. Anyway, so Happy New Year to everybody. We've got just 1 minute after 5 now, so maybe we'll wait 1 more minute, and we'll do our go around and hi and howdies and begin our program. Deb, how are you doing? Are you in DC?
No, I actually have been a remote employee all along. So I work out of Rhode Island. But,
okay.
Yeah, folks in DC are pretty shaken up by what happened. That's for sure.
I bet they are. I bet they are. All right. Let's see. Courtney, how's it looking in the waiting room? Is everybody here?
Yeah, I think we are good to start.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let me welcome everybody to the first Stop TA Clinic of the new year of 2021. It's great to see some of you again and see your names. For the others of you, I hope you'll join in with your video when you're able to. I am really happy to be joined, of course, today. I'm Robin Hassler-Thompson. I'm one of the consultants to Also and the STAR project. And I'm really happy to be part of these ongoing programs. I'd like to maybe take a moment and just, why don't we do something a bit different? And let me ask everybody from Also to kind of say hello and say what you do, and then we'll move to the states and territories. So let me start with those from Also. Courtney, would you like to start? You're muted.
Hi, I'm Courtney Katoskis. I am the program coordinator with the STAR project at Also.
Hi, I'm Mary. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marisol.
Go, Mary.
I'm Mary Seifman, the Director of Policy and Justice Initiatives at Also.
Can you tell we're excited to be here? I'm Marisol, the event manager at Also. It's good to see all of you guys. Welcome back.
Welcome back and starting over again. So we have with us a very wonderful speaker today, Nicole Matthews. And what I'd like to do is take a moment and introduce her. And then as I'm introducing her, I'd like to ask all of you to do what we've done the past few times with these programs, which is to think about, number one, when Courtney sent you the notice that this was going to be the topic of our program today, that Nicole was going to be our special guest speaker, that you might have had some thoughts run through your mind about questions you might have about working with tribes in particular, integrating involvement of tribes into the Stop TA planning process, the Stop implementation planning process, and into your work in general on an ongoing basis. So when you saw this, we know this is a really important topic because it's rare to find any of our programs where the issue of working with tribes has not come up in some way or another, some aspect where you all have been saying, this is what we do with success, or this is where we need help. So we're really lucky to have Nicole with us today. I'd like to take a moment and let you know a little bit more about her. See, I know this is an older person thing that I should print things out, but sometimes I don't, thinking I'm going to be really facile online. But I, hold on just a sec. And let me pull this up. Oh, I see what happened here. Nicole Matthews is a member of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe and is the executive director for the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. That's a statewide coalition and a national tribal technical assistance provider. She addresses sexual assault through the coalition and sex trafficking against Indigenous people. The mission of the organization is to strengthen the voices of Indigenous women to create awareness, influence social change, and reclaim the traditional values that honor the sovereignty of Indigenous women and children, thereby eliminating sexual violence perpetrated against them. Their vision is really strong. It is to creating safety and justice for Native women through the teaching of our grandmothers. Nicole was one of 5 researchers who interviewed 105 Native women used in prostitution and trafficking for their report, Garden of Truth, the prostitution and trafficking of Native women in Minnesota. Nicole serves as the vice chair for Minnesota's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force. She's a board member for the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, and has presented, of course, at numerous conferences and events on sexual violence and sex trafficking. Nicole is also the proud mother of 3 beautiful children and a grandmother to one who I found out just now is 3 years old. They give her strength and motivation to continue working to end gender-based violence. So Nicole, welcome. Welcome to our clinic, and thank you for taking your time both to prepare for this and to present with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So what we like to do is we like to ask everyone who is attending these programs to kind of start out, and you can say who you are and what you do in the state or jurisdiction or with the organization that you're representing. And if you could add on any questions, comments, or issues that you'd like Nicole to touch on today. We talked in advance about some of the things that she could speak on. So as usual, we probably have enough to fill up an hour, right? But we want to start with the issues and things that you're thinking about when you came to attend today. So why don't we just start and have any of the STOP administrators just pop in. Unmute yourselves.
I'll go.
Oh, good, because I will start calling on people. You know that. I'm not polite like people in the past. I'll call on you. So, okay, go, Lori.
I'm Lori Miller. I work at the Iowa Attorney General's office as the grant administrator. I oversee, or our office oversees, the STOP VAWA, SAS, FOCA, and the FIPSA grants. And we are all working remotely now, so that's kind of exciting, especially when you hear about people descending on the Capitol. So glad I'm not there. That's where my office was. And what I thought of when I saw who our speaker was, I just thought it's very interesting. We have the topic, we have one tribe in Iowa. We work really well with our tribe. We have a really good relationship with them, but it's something that I think that the information is just so important to always hear. So I'm glad you're here.
Okay, great. And just so you know, for some of you who may not have officially state or federally recognized tribes, Nicole's going to speak to us as well about, tribal members who are living in jurisdictions where there aren't. So, everybody's really should have something around tribal participation in your STOP plans. All right, who's next?
My name's Laura Russell. I'm in Oklahoma. I'm the grant program specialist for SAS, VAWA, and rural. We have 39 federally recognized tribes. We work really well with our tribal coalition, but not so well with the leaders of the tribes. And right now, our tribes are kind of not happy with our governor. So they don't really want to hear from anybody from the state. We always fund at least one tribe with our VAWA funds, but we fund a lot more with our VOCA funds because they get a lot more money with VOCA. Mm-hmm. We're hoping with the recent McGirt decision that we might actually get some tribes to apply for some court funding. So anyway, that's our hope. We're ever hopeful, but we reach out to the tribal leaders. They just always say, why don't you talk to our tribal programs? And we're like, well, we do talk to your tribal programs, but we'd like your input as well. We don't ever get it though. So,
okay. Really good issues, Laura. Thank you. Okay, who's next?
Hi, my name is Karen Lombry, and I am from North Carolina. I am the VAWA administrator. And I was really excited when I saw that we had, that this was going to be the topic today, because I really do struggle with getting tribes involved, especially when they don't apply for STOP funding, because right now it is just seen as like so impossible. We're having a lot of discussions around our culturally specific allocation and how not just the tribes, but are having issues based off of what some of our requirements are for applying, and going through our GEM system, which is our grantee management system, supporting documents, what you have to have in place. So it's and right now we're not at the place that a lot of organizations that are culturally specific are applying. So I guess it's, how do you get folks around the table when we haven't figured that part out yet of how we can change things and merge things, when it's like, come give your feedback, but we know you're not going to get any money because we know there's too many hoops for you to jump through.
Okay, good. Thank you, Karen. Excellent. All right. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Riley. I am the brand new STOP VAWA administrator in Colorado. So I'm just excited to be part of this group and get to know some of the other administrators and learn along the way.
Welcome.
We do have a new grantee that is a tribe. So I definitely have lots to learn around that in addition to everything else.
Good. Well, congrats on the new position, Riley.
Thanks.
That's great. Okay. Emma, you look like you're ready to say something. Could I ask you to introduce yourself, Emma?
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emma West Rasmus, and I am an OVW program specialist. So just here purely to learn and be an observer. And as always, if there are things that you would like to discuss without OVW on the line, I'm happy to jump off. Nicole, it's great to see you. I think the last time I saw you, we were in Mexico City working on a trilateral meeting on violence against Indigenous women and girls. So it's good to see you in this context. It's been a while. So thanks for being here.
That's great, Emma. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Jason, Alicia, Stephanie?
Yeah, I can go. First of all, I'm sorry I don't have my camera on. My internet is not functioning well. I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to get on this call. This is Alicia Goodwin. I work for the Department of Justice in Oregon, and I'm not actually the STOP administrator. I'm the SASP administrator. Our STOP administrator, Diana, her and I work very closely together, and she wasn't able to be on this call today. So of course I volunteered to do it. This work is very important to us here in Oregon with our STOP funds. We currently fund 8 out of 9 of our federally recognized tribes. Diana has done a lot of work since before I came here to build those relationships. And something that's often on my mind, especially lately, is, you know, when Diana makes that decision to like retire or take a job elsewhere, how do we keep those connections once she's gone? Because there's kind of this, I don't know if it's just our state, but there's usually like a person that does a lot of that contact with the tribes, and how do you keep that connection between folks? It's kind of where my thoughts are right now.
Really important. We talked, I know when Olga spoke with us earlier, about the importance of long-term relationships and having a long-term vision for work together in general. So yeah, if someone leaves, that is a big concern. Okay, who else hasn't introduced who can say, Jason, you ready?
Sure. Jason Patry from Wyoming, the Division of Victim Services. So we have STOP, SASP, VOCA, FIPSA, and some state funds. I really don't have any specific questions, although certainly interested in the topic. Our relationship with our 2 federally recognized tribes has been improving slowly over the last few years. So hopefully that will continue to improve and things will get better.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Great. Yeah, tips today on that for sure. Stephanie or Karen?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
I'm Stephanie Lowry. I work for the Oklahoma District Attorney's Council. I'm the STOP administrator. And we have 39 federally recognized tribes. So we're really busy when it comes to working on our implementation plan and getting out there and trying to make contact and visit with those tribes either in person or virtually now. I've been doing this work for 25 years, so I've had a relationship with a lot of those tribes through the various grants that I've worked with. But there are some that we've just never had a very good relationship with. Not that it was bad, but just that they don't have any kind of domestic violence or sexual assault program at all. There's, I want to say, Laura, how many, 18 or 19 that actually have a DBSA program. And we have a strong relationship with our tribal coalition. But then the other ones, it's hard to reach out to them and try to visit with them about what VAWA is or VOCA is or other funding sources when there's not any type of established program for those services. And then we've even tried to reach out to tribal courts because we have an issue with providing funding to the courts in our state, the district courts. So we've reached out to tribal courts to provide the court money from VAWA. And even though we get good responses back, we never actually get applications back. And so that's the struggle that we see, is trying to actually get them to apply. Even though we feel like we're doing all we can and extending application period timelines, because we realize they have to go before business councils to get approval to even apply. So we extend the application period, and we still just don't get those applications in our hand in order to approve that funding for them. So any ideas or tips we'd appreciate.
Okay, great.
I'll pop in and just say hi so folks know I'm Deb DeBear with the National Network to End Domestic Violence, and we provide TA and support to the coalitions. So I'm happy to be a collaborating partner here with you all.
Really glad to have you, Deb. Thank you. Who hasn't spoken yet? Latanya, would you like to chime in?
Certainly. I had to turn off my camera because my internet was unstable. So I apologize for that. My name's Latanya Edie. I work alongside Emma and the other folks at OVW, and we're here for support, any questions that we may be able to answer for you. And I'm here to listen and learn, and it's great to see all of the faces, although you can't see mine. So again, I apologize for that.
It's our world now, Latanya. It's fine. It's good. Okay, has everyone introduced? Did I forget anybody? Okay, good. Well, Nicole, I think we have enough questions to talk for a couple hours, but we only have until 6 o'clock. But why don't we start? And would you like to kick it off and to kind of address some of these issues and talk about what we discussed?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I was trying to write down the questions. So if I missed something, please let me know. I think I captured everything, and I think it's really in alignment with what we talked about last week too. So,
yes.
And so first I'll talk about, some of you brought up kind of relationship building and also how to sustain relationships long term. So beyond the person, right? Because sometimes we get attached to a person and there's that one connection. And so how do we sustain those relationships over time so that if there's turnover, someone leaves, that you still maintain that relationship. So I think first of all, relationship building has to happen over time, and it can't be, I think it's important to not just build those relationships when you are needing to develop your plan, but to really make those relationships to get to know the tribe. And someone had mentioned not having Oklahoma, I think. It was harder to make a relationship with the tribal leader. They would defer to the victim services. And so I think some of it is like, we want to respect and recognize this sovereign to sovereign relationship that we have. And so, certainly in COVID times, it's hard to say, hey, can we come out and meet with you? But trying to schedule a Zoom call and then, if they would like to invite the victim services person as well, whoever they see as would be fit to have in that meeting. I think always taking the lead from them, but I think it's important to really lead with, like, this is a sovereign to sovereign relationship. And so we're coming to you first because of that, because we recognize that and we understand that. And then just, obviously, making it really wanting to get to know the tribe, like wanting to understand like what their needs are, and thinking from your framework, like what is the capacity that you can enter into this relationship with them? What is it that the work that you all do that could complement and assist their tribal community's needs? And so, I think in non-COVID times, it is helpful to go out to the tribe because you want to see, what their community looks like and how they do their work. I know Oklahoma is a very different sort of world when it comes to tribal jurisdiction. And it's very complicated, and there's checkerboard jurisdiction. And so there's a lot of challenges with that, right? And so it's important to talk to the people and find out, like, what does that mean when a victim responds, and how does your work look differently because of that? And what are the challenges that you're facing, and what that could look like as far as, in their approach to funding. And I think through some of those conversations can, I think, really help to build an application should they want to, because if you can fully understand their community, then you can help them to think through, hey, we could fund you to do X, Y, and Z that would really address some of these jurisdictional loopholes, or we could really fund you to partner with, the county attorney's office to do X, Y, and Z, or what have you. So I think, really having a better understanding about the tribes would be helpful. Many of our tribes don't have a lot of assistance when it comes to developing the application. So, one of the things that you brought up was also, we make those connections, we make those relationships, and then it doesn't trickle down to actually getting an application. So we're still not getting that. And so that's, I think, where the front end technical assistance would be really helpful to help them think through, this is what our funding is for. And then, like I was saying, like understanding what their services look like, what their community looks like. What does it look like when someone calls to, when a victim calls to report domestic violence or sexual violence, and then help them to think through what could an application look like? Because I think that can be a really big barrier. There may be funding available, but we don't know what we want to apply for. And if we don't have a grant writer that has that hat of thinking through that or speaking grant language, we're not putting in those efforts. Are there questions? And also, I would really love this to be a conversation. So if there's things that come up, like, feel free to jump in.
And I was just thinking of one thing as you were saying that, Nicole, too. I think STOP administrators have a lot of potential to structure their RFPs in certain ways. So would they want to separate a pot of money out for only for tribes, so that there's not that sense of you're competing against an organization that has 30 years of grant writing experience under its belt for this very program? So you can structure the way you put your funding out there too, so that it is sort of in a way that you can nurture kind of and help the people who are applying and understand their needs better.
Yeah, one of the things that was really helpful for us in Minnesota, and I was kind of wishing Cecilia Miller would be on here because she could talk more about that from Minnesota's perspective. But one of the things that she did here and was to create, the funding that would go just to the tribes. And we, in having conversations with her, we told her, like, tribes don't want to compete with each other either. They don't want to feel like if I apply, then it's taking money from another tribe that might not get the funding. And so there was a pot of money, and it was, she went to every single community and contacted every single tribal leader and met with, and then also, invited me as the director from Tribal Coalition, and then we have another Tribal Coalition in Minnesota, to attend those meetings with the tribal leaders, sometimes tribal council members, sometimes victim services, to really have a conversation about OJP, about what their services are for, what their funding is for, and the different funding streams, that she wanted to let them know this was non-competitive funding. They were not competing with any of the tribes. This is what the pot of money would look like. This is what they could do with that. And then to think through some of those ideas, and then to really listen, right? To then just sit and listen to the tribal leader or to the victim services, to really talk about what their specific needs are, what they would really love to do. Sometimes they had law enforcement that were there, tribal law enforcement. Sometimes they had their victim services person there. Sometimes they had human services or social services there. And sometimes even child protection, as all people that had a stake in addressing this issue. And so then she met and then heard back from every single tribe that was going to apply for that funding, and then divided that pot of money equally for all those tribes. And I believe we had 10 out of the 11 tribes here that ultimately submitted an application. And that was up from, prior to that, some years ago when we first started looking at funding, our state funding, only specifically for sexual assault, so we only had like 5 or 6 of our tribes that were funded. So we've come a long way in really making sure that we had funding available. And I think, going to the tribal community says a lot to the tribal leaders as well, because, I think even as a tribal coalition director, sometimes we would say, well, how do we get tribes to the table? How come we can never get tribal leaders to come? And I had a conversation with a tribal leader many years ago, and what he said was, you have to stop expecting that we're going to come to your table. Why don't you come to ours? Like, we're running sovereign nations, and we have not just this that we're thinking about, right? We have many other issues that we are trying to address as a tribal leader. We have the entire well-being of our communities and our nations to consider. And so I think making those connections in those communities with that specific tribe is really important. And it really shows that you have an understanding and respect that sovereign to sovereign relationship. So I will say that about, relationship building. And I think, when we think about building that relationship and maintaining it is also making sure there's ongoing communication, right? Not just when there's, your plan is due, or not just when it's funding, but, checking in periodically, and not just one person either. So they have a connection with the entire agency and not just that one person, so that if that one person leaves, you don't lose that relationship. Or if you know that someone is leaving, that they're building that connection with someone else, I think is really important. Questions about that? Or thoughts?
Anybody have any questions? And you're also welcome to put your questions in the chat. And also, Nicole, I may not have said this before, but if you have any resources you want people to check into, Mary is aces at finding them instantly and putting them in the chat so people can get them and download them. So if you have any ideas about where you want to send folks for after this program, feel free to let us know. And Mary and Courtney and Marisol, and they can help people get those resources.
Awesome. All right, I'm trying to read my notes of all these questions, and I'm sorry, I'm like losing my voice, and I don't know what's going on. I have teenagers, so maybe I'm gonna blame my teenagers. They make me
sound good. You sound good.
All right. So I was going to talk about, I wanted to also talk about, when we were talking about jurisdiction and also thinking about state versus federally recognized tribes, because I know, we most often think about how are we serving our federally recognized tribes, but many of you may also have state recognized tribes. And I think it's really important to make sure that we're reaching out to our state recognized tribes as well. I know in Wisconsin, they have 11 federally recognized tribes, but they have another tribe that's state recognized. And they're really good at making sure they reach out to them and they have a relationship with them and they're connected. And I think that's really important because state recognized tribes have less access to funding, less access to the resources that federally recognized tribes do. And so I think it's really important if you do have state recognized tribes to include them in that as well. I'm really happy to hear that you all are connecting with your tribal coalitions in your state, because I think they can really be such a great resource and such a great connector for you with the tribes and can help those relationships. And certainly, like you said, in Oklahoma, certainly sometimes politics get in the way. And even with the best of intentions, those relationships are difficult, right? During certain administrations, during certain things. So that I certainly understand. And I think, again, it's just trying to make those connections as much as you can. And yeah, I think using tribal coalitions is really great. And maybe that's where you lean on those relationships that the tribal coalition has, because they certainly have those relationships with all of those tribes. And so, we've had Cecilia Miller come to our statewide conference and held listening sessions just to be there to listen to, the tribal advocates and listen to some of the issues. And I think that's another way to kind of make those relationships. In Minnesota, we also have what's called the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, and it's a state agency, but they convene every single tribal leader in Minnesota, and they meet quarterly. And that's another great way. So she has worked with them as well to be able to make those connections with tribal leaders. And so if you have a similar convening, because many of our states have some sort of interstate tribal council where all the tribal leaders are coming together, but try to get on their agenda, I think is another great way. So they make that connection. So they see your face. So they know, what you have to offer, I think is a really great way as well. I think right now with COVID, I think tribes are really struggling, much like everybody, much like the rest of us are really struggling. So I think reaching out and finding out what resources, sorry, I'm trying to read. Oh, they have a tribal liaison in your office.
Yeah, let me read it. Yeah, would you like me to read it?
Sure.
Okay, that Laura says we have a tribal liaison with our office who has been great in setting up tribal roundtable discussion groups, which until COVID met quarterly, and she attended those and put VAWA on the agenda. So there was that kind of ongoing relationship, right? And seeing that whatever the governmental entity is not a substitute, but a kind of means toward building relationships or starting relationships.
That's great. That's great. I think it's really helpful. We also have a tribal liaison here, and that is really helpful because they can be such a great resource in making those connections and connecting with the tribes, I think. And I think it also matters who your tribal liaison is, because some people are incredibly skilled at relationship building and follow up and because I think it's not just the initial contact, it's the follow-up, it's the providing resources, it's the providing the support, it's the ongoing stuff that really matters. And so, I think it's also really helpful to get the right person in that position that really does work as a liaison with the tribes and with your tribal organizations or tribal coalitions that can really build those bridges, I think is critical. I am trying to read.
There was a question about some of the tribes, with a state that had a lot of tribes, with some that don't have specific DVSA programs, and how you how do you start? Where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think, really, for those of you that have tribal coalitions, I would work with your tribal coalitions because that's somewhere that you can, partner with them to have conversations about how can, the tribal coalitions can work with them on even developing their applications and talking to them about what would it take, what is the support that you all need to develop a domestic violence, sexual assault program. When Cecilia Miller and I and the other tribal coalition met with the tribal leaders, many of them didn't have, or a couple of them didn't have victim services. And so we talked about what are your needs in the community? And how, what would be helpful, and what would, what are the issues that you're seeing? Are you seeing more domestic violence or sexual violence? Do you have sexual violence in the area, or sexual violence services in the area so it's being covered somewhere and you don't feel like you need something tribal specific? So what does it look like? But I think it helps to have someone, with a tribal coalition or someone who can help you think through those things, or, as you're meeting with them to really think through. And some of them don't want one, to be quite honest. And I will also say another thing that I think is really important is to try to, as much as you can, to eliminate the barriers to accessing funding. Because the way our funding is set up, many of our tribes are getting federal funding, and the way it's set up federally is it goes to the tribe, and most oftentimes it goes to it's within the context of social services, right? So it's not like a standalone. It's set up very differently than your standalone rape crisis centers or your standalone domestic violence centers. It's actually it's part of the tribal government. It's under usually social services or human services or something similar. And so I think it's important to have an understanding of what that looks like. And then I think some of our tribes have not applied for state funding because there are too many either barriers, there's additional requirements, maybe the reporting is really challenging. And so they choose not to. Right. And that's okay. And that's okay if that's what their choice is. But I think also sometimes we have some requirements maybe that are not necessary. Obviously, there are requirements that are necessary. You have to report to the feds. So we want to make sure that everybody's in compliance with all of those requirements. But are there additional barriers that you have that may be stopping tribes from applying? And maybe taking a real honest look at what are the grant requirements to applying, and what are the reporting requirements, and how can you maybe be a little more lenient, and how can you restructure those so that it's easier for people to apply, I think is important. I think when Cecilia first offered that funding to the tribes, she completely eliminated the deadline for them to turn in their application, which I know is a huge challenge for you all, because you're like, okay, get the application in. Like, how am I going to fund you if I don't have an application, right? But she was very, very patient with them and helping them to think through it, and to gave them the time they needed to develop their application, and went back to them if she needed edits and changes and things. So really to allow that time for them to get that in. And then she also, provided extensions if they needed extensions. on spending their money. I think right now, you know, with COVID, we're seeing a lot of people who are underspent because certainly for those of us who are TA providers and others, where, you know, nobody's traveling. And so, you know, we all have some unspent funds because of travel or things that we've had to reallocate. And so to be open to making those changes is really important as well. All right. I'm trying to think, are there questions that I feel like I've jumped all around in circles? I also think I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, for some of you who maybe don't have any federally recognized tribes, to also be thinking through, like, you know, over half of us don't live in our tribal communities. You know, I think upwards of 70% or more live in urban Indian areas, urban areas. And so, so we are not only on tribal reservations. And so to think through the ways that you are serving, just like you would think through the ways you are serving communities of color in your state, to also think through the ways that you are serving your tribal people that don't reside on tribal reservations. So don't think about us only living, you know, in one area, because certainly we exist everywhere. And so I think that's also really important to think through. And, you know, we've heard a lot of that from our tribal nonprofits, our urban Indian programs, is we always get, you know, they're like, we always get left out of funding because we're not a tribe. We're in an urban area, but we serve the tribal community in the urban area. And so also thinking through, how can I provide funding and explicitly say funding is available for urban Indian or for tribal nonprofits, right? For programs within urban areas that maybe aren't, or it doesn't have to go through the tribal government, I think is really important as well.
Can I ask the group, do you all have any innovative programming around that issue of assisting, you know, members of a tribe who are in an urban area or on not, you know, on a, you know, the actual land space of a reservation? It strikes me as a really important thing. And I shared with Nicole a little story, which is, I think some of you know, I head up a nonprofit here to assist survivors of trafficking. And we were at our homeless shelter and a Native woman came and needed help getting documents from a tribal authority. And our advocate had not, you know, just had a heck of a time. Let me put it to you that way, because it was an entirely new issue to navigate. So even basic information to advocates about how to really fully and competently represent, you know, Native women who are outside the confines of the tribal, you know, government, it would be really, really helpful. And I think a population often missed.
It for sure is a population often missed. Yeah, it's definitely an issue. I also wanted to bring up the intersections around sexual assault and specifically with tribes. And, you know, I think certainly sexual assault services is newer in tribal communities. And then you add, you know, sex trafficking and now MMIW. And it becomes very challenging. And I know for many years we had tribes that didn't even want to say sexual assault and were actually calling their sexual assault advocate a domestic violence advocate, even though they were funded through sexual assault funding. And but there's a lot of issues that are connected to that. And some of the issues have to do with, you know, the impact of trauma from boarding schools and from, you know, kind of that long history of, you know, the historical trauma. And so many of our tribes have a challenge with addressing sexual assault, and I think are newer to addressing sexual assault. And not to say that it's not an issue that needs to be addressed, but it's something that I think is newer. And so, you know, there needs to be more support. I mean, it's, we're one of the TA providers for the Elevate Uplift project, which grew out of the Sexual Assault Demonstration Initiative. And that was the whole premise of, we have a lot of dual agency programs, domestic violence, sexual assault programs across the country, not just in tribal communities, but when we have a lot of dual programs, most often they're addressing domestic violence. And a much smaller percentage of their work and energy goes towards addressing sexual assault. And so I just wanted to say that to say, we know the statistics. We know 1 out of 3 Native women has experienced sexual violence. We know the numbers are probably much higher because many of us do not report because of many multiple issues, failure, to trust the systems, and lack of response, lack of prosecution. And so, but sexual assault is definitely an issue in Indian country. All right. Are there things?
Stephanie is asking if everyone has heard of Safe Star, and there are several Safe Star programs in Oklahoma. So there's a link in your chat about Safe Star. Thank you for that link, and thanks for bringing that up, Nicole.
Yeah, Safe Star is great. And one of the things that has come up around like forensic exams too is, we have many communities that don't have access to the forensic exam or don't have it nearby, right? Like if you're living in an urban area, you might have to drive 10 minutes to your local hospital to get a forensic exam. In a tribal community, you may have to drive 3 hours to get a forensic exam. Many of our IHS facilities are clinics. Not all of our tribal communities have a hospital. And so many of them are clinics, and they're not set up. Obviously, they're not, 24-hour services. They're not set up to handle forensic exams. And if they have them, much like many other urban communities, the staff are usually not trained on how to do them, right? And many of us have probably heard horror stories of people who've gone in and had a forensic exam done by someone who had no idea what they were doing and was reading directions, right? And how traumatic that is. And so we know that there's many barriers to accessing forensic exams, but there are the programs like Safe Star to train lay people in the community to do those exams. There's also been some movement towards telemedicine, particularly up in Alaska, where that's a whole, another spin on rural. Like, I don't think we even have an understanding of rural. When you take a look at Alaska, and sometimes they can't even get anywhere for days, right? And so telemedicine has been working well in some communities like that. But even with telemedicine, then you have to rely on, do I have internet connection? Can I connect with someone? And if there's any sort of weather, they may not have that connection. So certainly a lot of barriers.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things too, I think during COVID, that you can kind of ask people about innovations that they might need, or things that they might need help with that they didn't identify as needs before, probably were there, but really became more prominent during COVID.
Yeah.
So maybe some of that travel money or some of the conference budgets could be shifted to some of this infrastructure.
I mean, there are still tribal communities and places that just do not have adequate internet services. And so, in this world of COVID where we are all virtual, there are many people that just don't have access to this, and don't have good access to this, and maybe not have confidential access to the internet and to connecting. And so when we look at victim services right now during COVID, that is a challenge as well. And we have, I don't know what it looks like in your communities, but I know we still have advocates who maybe are elders or maybe have health issues, but they're still furloughed because of COVID, because the tribe wants to make sure that we don't put anyone at risk, that their health comes first, and we don't want to put, our elders or someone who's immune compromised at risk right now. And so, a lot of barriers and a lot of issues. I'm sure you all are hearing some of them as well in your own communities, of things that are barriers during COVID.
And it's really, after today, it's making me think even more, no matter what your priorities are in your plan, you should be saying, and how does this impact Native women? How does this impact, sexual assault issues, within tribal populations? Just asking those questions and forcing a kind of analysis, right? And realizing if you can't answer that question, who can? And,
right.
We talked earlier too about bringing people, quote, to that proverbial table, which of course, is virtual now. But how do you deal with issues of representation on, say, official VAWA stop planning teams when you have 39 tribes in your jurisdiction? Or how do you make sure that you get maybe information out to everybody and do it in a way that's, that's effective and meets the needs of those individuals, when we know administrators have limited time and budgets and resources and people and all that. So how do you get people to the table in a meaningful way, say for the planning process and after?
Yeah. Well, I think you need to show up to their table, and I think you need to do listening sessions. 39 tribes is a lot of tribes to make sure you're listening to the voices of everyone. But you could do, regional listening sessions. I think, one of the things, speaking about technology, but one of the things that 2020 has taught us is that we can do a lot with technology, and we can get people at the table at a virtual table, right? And, that's another way to maybe get people. They don't have to leave their communities. They can, you can still connect with them. Certainly I think it's always better to be in community with each other. Certainly not the world we are living in right now, but when there's no COVID, when we're in a different world, when we can move about freely, certainly doing regional listening sessions can help. Partnering with tribal coalitions or other coalitions or groups that convene with the tribes, reaching out, making connections, sending a letter to the tribal leader, following up with a phone call. Who do you need at the table? If they say, I'm too busy, I think you should talk to my victim services. Great, tell me who you think I should talk to, and then making that connection. Or maybe it's both, but really giving several different opportunities to make sure that their needs are being addressed, and that their needs are heard, and that there's opportunities for them to show up, and for you to be, to be there to listen to them.
Great. We've got about 5 minutes left. Is anybody who's on the call, would you like to chime in and echo any of the points that Nicole made? This has been a really great, I think, primer and laying of the groundwork and giving us lots of information, Nicole. Anybody want to follow up with any of the questions you posed at the beginning, or talk about promising practices in your own jurisdictions of what might be happening that kind of echoes and supports what Nicole is saying, or any other challenges you're facing? So you answered everybody's questions perfectly then. Way to go. Well, it sounds like I was looking at my notes too, and it looks like you did cover lots of the bases, because really what you said before about how do you build relationships, how do you start relationships, you covered that. How do you build them? How do you sustain them? So you're not just saying, please look at this draft plan so I can check off this box when I submit it to OVW. Yeah. But you're asking for an ongoing relationship that's going to take time.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. And I like the idea too, when you said, if we know that there's so many issues going on, like, don't just limit your world of interaction with the tribe to your one little, agenda item. Find out what's meaningful, what's going on in that community.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to them.
That's right. And when life resumes, to go to that community, to see how they do their work, to see the challenges that they face, to see maybe, the physical space that they're working in, to see how far do they have to drive to get a sexual assault exam. Do they have tribal law enforcement? Where are they located? How much coverage, how much space do they, how many miles do they cover? How many officers do they have? What does prosecution look like? Is it public law 280, where the tribe has concurrent jurisdiction with the state? Or is it non-public law 280, where the tribe has concurrent jurisdiction with the feds? Because those are all different systems that they are working with, right? And so it's important to know who are all the players and who are all the partners and the people who are addressing this issue and who are responding to domestic violence, to sexual assault, to stalking within their communities, I think is really important to know.
And hearing the stories, just making sure you're grounded on just hearing stories. If you can do that, I think you learn so much, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Well, this idea of listening sessions is certainly powerful to think about, and easier, like you're saying, possibly to take care of during these times. And can people reach out to you for technical assistance on this, Nicole?
Yes, absolutely. And our website is, here I'll put it in, we just relaunched a brand new website. Our website was down for almost a year because people hacked our website and kept linking it to porn. So we just redid it. There's no more porn.
What a world. Okay. Good. Congratulations. That must feel great.
It's great and it's beautiful. And yeah. So we just
good.
And there is a way to contact us. There's a way to request technical assistance. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, this is taking us right to the top of the hour. Does anyone have any final comments or questions? Okay. Well, Nicole, on behalf of everyone, thank you very much for your presentation, your words of wisdom. I'd like to turn it back over to Courtney and Mary if you'd like to say anything in terms of the Stop TA project and close us out. This was wonderful. This was
sure. Yeah.
Informative.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you, Robin. Thanks everyone for joining. Very soon we'll be sending you notice of a new Stop TA website that we hope will make it easy for you to find the tools and resources that you need. You should be seeing that hopefully later on this week. So keep an eye open for that, and some other goodies to come your way pretty soon. Thanks, everybody.
Great. And the next one, we're looking at the 25th.
Yes.
See you all back then. Same time, same Zoom link. All right.
Sounds
okay,
great.
Bye. Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, I was just going to say goodbye.
Okay. All right. All right, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.